Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Today we are plunging into a text that's, well, it's less a book and maybe more a foundational philosophical manifesto. It's Terence McKenna's highly provocative 1992 work, Food of the Gods, The Search for the Original Tree of Knowledge. And this book, it didn't just, discuss psychedelics. It really dropped right into the cultural pressure cooker of the early 90s and challenged, well, the entire structure of Western thought, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. That timing is just crucial. You have to remember, 1992 was near the absolute peak of the war on drugs hysteria. The dominant narrative was all about control, moral panic, fear.
Right.
And McKenna's work was kind of designed as the radical counterpoint. It really functioned as a manifesto for new thought about drugs.
So he wasn't just arguing for, say, drug liberalization. It was deeper than that.
Much deeper. He was arguing that Western society itself suffers from this profound illness. He called it narcissism, a deep existential incompleteness.
Which led him to coin that term, dominator culture.
Exactly. He painted our modern lifestyle, hierarchical, paternalistic, materialistic, as actively denying a really fundamental human need, the desire for the transcendental.
Okay.
He saw the official prohibition culture as embodying this rigid, almost terrifying social control, actively fighting against the vegetable mind, as he put it.
He called it control-obsessed, even beige fascism at one point, I think.
He did, yeah. The core message was that we lost our way. We lost this necessary symbiotic relationship with nature, specifically through psychoactive plants.
Okay, so if that loss is the root of our cultural sickness, McKenna needed an origin story. And he provides, well, probably the most famous and definitely the most controversial of his ideas, the stoned ape hypothesis, which tries to solve one of the great puzzles of human evolution.
Right, that puzzle being the sheer speed of human brain evolution. It's still a genuine scientific mystery.
Yeah.
You watch proto-hominids evolving and then bang. From about 2 or 3 million years ago, the brain volume just triples. It happens in a geological blink of an eye.
Which, as some scientists noted, was perhaps the fastest advance recorded for any complex organ. That's huge.
It is huge. And scientists still struggle, really, to account for how genetic mutation alone could drive such a rapid cognitive leap.
And McKenna just jumps into this gap, basically, and declares he's found the real missing link.
Pretty much. He posits the catalyst wasn't just genetic pressure, but chemical mediation, hallucinogenic tryptamine compounds, specifically psilocybin.
From magic mushrooms.
From magic mushrooms.
Hey,
Look, it's pure speculative anthropology, but it's compellingly detailed. His scenario puts early omnivorous hominids moving out of the forests onto the African grasslands, following large grazing animals like cattle.
Okay.
And here's the crucial botanical link. The primary source of psilocybin, the mushroom Stropharia cubensis, grows exclusively in the dung of these large cattle.
Exclusively. Okay, I have to pause here. That's a massive claim. That the emergence of human self-reflection, our consciousness, was catalyzed by early humans eating psychoactive mushrooms they found in cow dung. How does he argue this actually gave them immediate adaptive benefits, like survival benefits?
Right. Well, he detailed this kind of cascading set of advantages. He argued that consumption wasn't just random, it was profoundly beneficial, even in low doses. So at microdoses, he suggested it increased visual acuity, literally helping our ancestors spot predators, spot prey better in the tall grass.
Okay, that makes immediate evolutionary sense. A survival advantage right there.
A huge, measurable survival advantage.
But what about the bigger picture? The cultural shift, the consciousness transformation?
Well, at slightly higher doses, he claimed it led to heightened sexual arousal and stamina, which, promotes group cohesion, genetic mixing, maybe higher birth rates, population growth. But the real breakthrough, the powerful catalyst, according to McKenna, was at the full psychedelic dose. He proposed psilocybin stimulated the language-forming capacity of the brain, leading to self-reflection, to culture. He called this a kind of quasi-symbiotic relationship, an information transfer from the vegetable world to the human world, more like a deep-rooted custom than a purely genetic change.
Okay, so if the stoned ape hypothesis is the origin story, the result, in his view, was this golden age, the era of the partnership society.
Yes. He borrowed that term from Rian Eisler. It's a vision of pre-hierarchical, non-dominator societies, thriving before recorded history. And these cultures, supposedly maintained by regular psychedelic use, emphasize community bonding, boundary dissolution, non-proprietary sexual behavior, often reflecting the feminine archetype of the great goddess.
And he actually pointed to some amazing visual evidence for this, right? Like those Tassilian Ager Plateau rock paintings in the Sahara, they're ancient,
They are. 7,000 years old, some of them. And there are powerful imagery for his idea. Those ancient images show shamans dancing, sometimes with mushrooms literally sprouting from their bodies and surrounded by large numbers of grazing cattle.
Wow, so it visually links the mushroom, the cattle.
Exactly. The mushroom, pastoralism, and the power of what he called the Great Horned Goddess. For these societies, the mushrooms were the sacrament. They provided access to the transcendent other, the unseen mind that shamans insist is the spirit of the living world of nature. Allowing them, he argued, to access linguistic prowess and these grand visions of totality of beginnings and endings.
So if this partnership society was our sort of cultural Eden, we need to understand the fall. What caused that critical shift from this egalitarian partnership to the hierarchical, controlling dominator culture we arguably inhabit today?
McKenna pinned the fall largely on the discovery of agriculture. He saw it forcing a profound shift. Early gathering societies, they used a vast array of psychoactive and medicinal plants. But agriculture, it demanded a sedentary lifestyle, an intense focus on just a few domesticated grains, corn, wheat, barley.
So we traded botanical richness for centralized control, basically.
Exactly that. This narrowed attention caused a retreat from the wider natural world. Those domestic plants, the grains, they effectively replaced the old goddesses of plant-induced ecstasy, as he put it. And with settled societies came, property, surplus, and almost inevitably the rise of hierarchy, militarism, patriarchy.
And he sees that transition mirrored perfectly in the preferred intoxicant, moving from the ego-dissolving mushroom to alcohol.
Yes. Alcohol, in McKenna's view, is the perfect pharmacological partner for the dominator style. Unlike psychedelics, which tend to break down the ego, dissolve personal boundaries, alcohol is ego-reinforcing. It allows for temporary release, sure, but without ever really challenging the underlying structure of control. McKenna argued that alcohol abuse is deeply symptomatic of the state of disequilibrium in these hierarchical societies, facilitating, he thought, the unconstrained male ego and maintaining the repression of women and the feminine.
It's a powerful, definitely a sweeping historical synthesis. The implication being that this fatal ennui, as he called it, that now permeates Western civilization. It's just the long-term consequence of this drift away from the regular dissolution of the ego in the hyperspace of the transcendent other.
And if the crisis isn't just moral or political, but fundamentally pharmacological and psychological, then the solution must be too. Which brings us to his call for the Archaic revival, a deliberate return to these visionary states.
Which brings us right back to the tryptamines DMT, psilocybin. He saw them as ideal agents for this revival, pointing to their structural similarity to our own neurochemistry, serotonin especially, arguing for this deep, maybe necessary evolutionary relationship.
Absolutely. And he was particularly fascinated by DMT. It's the most powerful known hallucinogen. Yet it clears the system in, under 15 minutes?
Incredible speed.
Incredible. And the experience, he insisted, is not just a hallucination. It's a penetration of a membrane. You enter a convincingly real, apparently coexisting alien world. You don't just feel different, you encounter the other.
And this is where we get those famous descriptions, right? The entities, the tykes, or the self-dribbling crystalline machine elves lost to us since the fading of the magic light of childhood. He described their communication as a kind of visual linguistic explosion.
Yeah, he insisted these beings were intelligent, autonomous, external to the human ego. He noted that in these high-dose states, creativity is observed, not expressed by the individual. Language gives birth to itself, was one of his phrases. And for McKenna, the psychedelic community, the hyperdimensional explorers, the psychonauts, they're continuing this ancient shamanic project. They are wrestling with the implications of encountering an intelligence that seems separate from us, but somehow connected to the natural world.
So the ultimate message of Food of the Gods seems to be that this return, this reopening to the vegetable mind, it's actually a necessity for planetary survival. He gave us that clear, quite dire call to action. Our choice as a planetary culture is a simple one: go green or die. We have to restore that symbiotic relationship.
Exactly, to survive the dominance of the ego, essentially. And that's what makes the book feel like a portal, I think. McKenna used botany, history, personal experience. He turned the history of substances into a history of consciousness itself. The insight isn't just about the specific drug. It's about the, perhaps, narrowness of the reality we currently accept as the only one.
Which brings us to a concept he loved to reference, drawing on Aldous Huxley and the philosopher C.D. Broad. This idea that we often assume the brain produces consciousness, but what if its function is largely eliminative?
Right, the concept of the brain as a reducing valve. It doesn't create the totality of consciousness, it filters it down. It protects us, perhaps, from being completely overwhelmed by the limitless information of what Huxley called mind at large.
And by filtering, we're left only with, as Huxley put it, a measly trickle of the kind of consciousness which will help us to stay alive on the surface of this particular planet. Practical survival consciousness, but maybe nothing more.
And that's the final, really provocative thought McKenna leaves you grappling with, isn't it? If the purpose of the psychedelic experience is to temporarily open that reducing valve, to allow access to more of mind at large, what if that measly trickle we rely on for everyday life? What if it's simply no longer sufficient? What if in our current moment of ecological and cultural crisis, we actually need some of that overwhelming vision, that totality, to inform our collective survival? What vital insight are we, perhaps, willfully eliminating from our grasp?